Excellent. So welcome again. My name is Rula Jones, and I am the current gallery director at BlackRock Center for the Arts, as well as an artist, art educator, a writer, and independent curator of contemporary art. Joining me today is Stuart Diekmeyer, who currently has a solo exhibition in Gallery 2 entitled Curiosity of Scale, which features over 20 works of macrophotography that explores the organic microbe world. Stuart Diekmeyer has considered himself a photographer since his early days at boarding school in Dover, England. He has attended Dover College in Dover, England, the Corcoran College of Art and Design, and MICA, the Maryland Institute College of Art. He currently holds the position of visual arts specialist at the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. He has been an educator, curator, and artist for over 25 years. Welcome, Stuart.
Hello.
Okay. So just to ask you a couple of questions today. First, I thought maybe we could go back to Dover, England, because you do mention that, and just talk a little bit about how your interest in photography began.
Can you hear me okay? Yes. Okay, I'm never sure about this technology. Thank you, Rula. It's an honor to be part of this BlackRock Center for the Arts. I enjoy the space, and I'm really quite thrilled with the exhibition, and I thank you. I also want to thank everybody who's attending. It's good to see so many familiar faces. So yes, I was in boarding school in England for 5 or 6 years, and that's where my interest in art started, and then specifically photography. And I borrowed a friend's camera while I was there and started photographing. And actually, when I applied to college in the US, a lot of my work was photo-based that I used specifically for MICA. So, but that was my interest. I really just photographed whatever I saw, nothing unusual. So that's really where it started for me.
Excellent, thank you. Okay. What I'd like to do now is just go ahead and share screen your catalog. And so just give me a moment to do that. Oh, sorry. Okay.
It's the technology.
Okay, great. Okay, so this exhibition is going to be running until February 26th, just so that everybody knows. We are going to be having an opening reception on Saturday, February 12th from 5 to 7 p.m. So please do keep that in mind as we move forward. And so let's just take a look at your video that you created for this exhibition. Thank you so much for doing so. Mm-hmm.
I have considered myself a photographer since my early days at boarding school in Dover, England. However, I really started in traditional photography at MICA in Baltimore in 1983 and spent the next 25 years immersed in photography, including commercial and fine art. The images in this exhibition are aesthetically, technically, and visually a significant departure from my more traditional photographic work. Over the last 10 years or so, I have become increasingly more interested in the hidden and mysterious world of close-up or macro photography. I broke with my realistic and formal approach to photography, and I became aware of how unique and complex the seldom seen macro world can be. Photographing initially only digitally in color, it wasn't until 2017 when I started to convert past and present images into black and white, and then further manipulating them to create the mood and feel represented in this exhibition. The cool and warm toning in these images has its origins in the traditional but more subtle black and white darker manipulation called split toning. For these images, I chose a more extreme toning, which has served to render the mood of the images more dramatic, mysterious, abstract, and somewhat intentionally confusing. Through these images, it is my hope that the viewer is intrigued and curious enough to eventually see themselves wanting to exist within the subject matter. I know I do.
Okay. Okay, so maybe you can explain to everyone what exactly, right? Sorry, that's my dog. What exactly is macro photography?
Macro photography in the traditional sense is essentially just getting close enough to a subject, and typically it's plants, organics, but it can really be anything, and to see things that we ordinarily wouldn't see just in a day-to-day. So just paying attention to that smaller detail. It's usually more in the insect world, the plant world, where people then want to see the details and so forth, and probably more in the scientific realm as well, related to that. I did not photograph these pieces with that in mind, with a scientific element in mind. Obviously, a lot of times I actually don't really know what my subjects are. They're so abstract, which is what I like. I'm not going to give them the Latin names or anything like that. I really just want to explore, which is so for in terms of macro, that's or extreme close-up is another word.
Excellent. Yeah. And so, I mean, also, but this just technically, this type of photography has to be done with a single lens reflex camera, correct? So that you can place a macro lens upon the camera. So therefore you
could. Yeah, there's other ways to. One of the things I used to play a lot with was pinhole cameras.
Oh, okay.
And they sort of have an infinite, so you can actually get very close using a pinhole camera, and that also creates a very abstract. The challenge with those for me was it wasn't very immediate, and it would take time to process the film at that time. So, but you can really, but technically, yes, you would need a specialized lens. That's really not that expensive to achieve that and get really close. A lot of cell phones can actually get very close these days. So technology is shrinking, which is nice to know.
Great, thank you. So you talk a lot about in the video just about your previous work in the sense that it was more formal. And I went this morning to look at your website and saw some really beautiful other series that you were doing.
I think we might have lost Rula. Well, let me go ahead and jump right in here. My work up until this series has been very, very formal. I spent, well, let me just backtrack. The key element that I always looked for was sharpness. So there was a group of photographers in the 1930s that were called the F64 group, and they wanted to essentially have the image be sharp, foreground to background, and that's what my approach was for most of my early photography career. I threw away a lot of negatives because I didn't think they were sharp enough. So from that point, it wasn't until I started assisting with a local photographer, Claudio Vasquez, that I sort of became aware of the benefits of the out of focus element, so to speak, and that it could also add a layer of interest. So I started to look at images that I had that were not as sharp and sort of reinventing them. And along with that, I ventured into just looking at the world that was clearly all around us, but not really noticeable. I started with a macro when I started having to cut trees down that had fallen on my property, and I was up close to all these different elements of a tree, the buds, the leaves, other things that were attached to it, and I became intrigued with them and just the beauty of that, and started to photograph all sorts of things. Some of them I didn't know what they were, but my early work was very formal, and if you look at my website, there are certainly a bunch of series that I've done where the work is, everything has its right place, everything is sharp. So anyway, Rula's back. Yep, you're still muted, Rula.
Hi, everyone. So sorry about that. I trust you guys entertained yourselves while I dealt with my computer emergency.
Yes,
just going back.
I just spoke about my background of the early work. So.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So I didn't get to hear that about the winter textures. It also has a very sort of minimalist, obviously you call it minimalism, but it's very, restricted palette, if you will, very much like this series of yours. And I just wanted to ask you, why did you choose to do that? This was one of the questions that I had from somebody that came into the gallery. Why didn't he photograph these and keep them in color? What was the reasoning or the logic behind just sort of restricting that palette?
Well, that's a very good question. Typically macro is in color. I think for every 1,000 images out there, you might find one that's in black and white. I was not interested in using color for these images. They were originally photographed in color, but to me, color is descriptive. And black and white is a mood. And really what I wanted was a mood. These images really have nothing to do essentially with the subject matter itself. My intention was to create a very abstract, mysterious, and as I mentioned in the video, also confusing sort of experience as to, what are these? I didn't want them to be recognizable. Even if you get very abstract in color, or very close in color, it's still recognizable as a green leaf, a red ladybug, and so forth. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to take that away. And my preference has always been black and white. I did print while I was at the Corcoran. I was the first student there to use the color darkroom, and I did print a lot of color. But I was really interested in just keeping black and white on the horizon for myself, for my work. I do have a series of basketball hoops that are in color, but most everything else.
That one. Yeah, I was going to ask you. So your series of photographing basketball hoops, was really interesting to me because that's very, American, I would say, the basketball. So I was just curious what interested you in particular about that particular series.
I don't know how to play basketball. I don't think I've ever thrown a basketball. I just became intrigued when I first came to the US, and in the following years, I just became intrigued with this monument that was in every house, around every house. And as you see, and a lot of them that I discovered were deeply neglected. Not once did I ever find one or happen to come upon one where somebody was actually using it or playing, with a basketball. So for me, I found them to be just these moments in time where parents and sons and daughters would be out there connecting, and then suddenly that was the end. They just stayed there, and once in a while they might get used a little bit later, and they would be abandoned in a part of the garden or the yard where it was starting to get overgrown. So I just found those very interesting. A lot of them are homemade, but they were always very prominent. Either there was a Shakespeare Theatre scene shop right across the studio where I worked as an assistant, across the alley, and they had one inside. And that's actually one of the images on the website. And they were just very unusual, but you could find them everywhere. And I always enjoyed finding them. And then I had friends that would send me images or tell me, oh, there's one over here. And quite a few
like
of those
a collective Where's Waldo, right?
Yeah, well, so I always enjoyed finding them. But they were, in churchyards, schools, just some very odd places. It said a lot about, and I was not familiar with those at all in Germany, growing up in Germany and England. So
right. Yeah. So in your video, just returning back to the series, in your video, you mentioned that you wanted the viewer to feel like they were in the work themselves. And what's interesting, I should mention for those of you who have not gone to see the exhibitions, but what you can see, a photograph of one of the walls behind Stuart, that they are fairly printed out quite large, right? But the subject itself is quite small. So there's this contrast. And is it like you want us to feel like we are also small and, within that sort of world, which is almost otherworldly, I would suggest, because of, the way that you've manipulated it, and we don't really know, what is that, So you're saying this is a hibiscus that we have right now. So can you tell me a little bit about why you would want us to think that way about the work, like to pull us in?
It's a good question. I initially exhibited 4 of these at Artomatic in 2017 or 18. I can't remember quite when. And one of the comments a viewer had left intrigued me because I knew there was something more about these images that I liked and could put my finger on it. And they said they walked past them so many times that at one point they just felt like they could see themselves within the images, sort of little vignettes of some very abstract world that exists and that certainly is fantastical in many ways, but that they could walk through it and experience it that way. And I like that statement. Subsequently, when I printed these, I wanted them as large as possible. And my printer is the 24 inches max. If I could have gone larger, I could have tried, but that would have been way too expensive. So the idea was to really maximize that feeling. But I also think I want them as large as possible because there are things there that we really will never see unless there's an image of it out there that somebody could look at. It's so unique, the shapes, and then the unique textures that you find, and then similarities. larger things. Like I thought this piece looked like a pearl earring. I think earring is misspelled.
Yeah. Okay. So I have to say that this in particular piece, that it does remind me of the painting girl with a pearl earring. Is that reference? Is that a purposeful reference? It's a old painting. It actually looks very like as if and I'm not sure what that is exactly. The flower looks very much like it's being sort of posed, if you will, in the same way that the original painting is by Johann Vermeer, Girl with a Pearl Earring. She's sort of pulled to the side like that, and I'm sure everybody can take a quick Google search to see that. So was that a purposeful reference? Or
no, but I really do like that.
okay.
To be compared with Vermeer is really quite
yeah.
So no, actually it was just just the way it was hanging. Just the tree itself is actually not far from the corner here of the house, and it is actually that's exactly what they all look like, every single one of them. They're just like a series of earrings that were put there, little pearl earrings. And I really don't know the Latin name or even the common name of that tree, but it produces these shapes that I thought were very, very elegant and just suspending. But no, it wasn't intentional.
So I know you keep referencing the Latin names, but clearly we're in the arts. We don't. Even though there's a lot of crossover between the science and the arts, it's not necessary to be scientific about, visual arts. But I'm just curious, when you were growing up, did you live in an urban area or in natural environments? Did you have the opportunity to interact with nature? Did they even Dover, England is just so beautiful. Did they, have the did you have the ability to, learn about nature while you were there, or was it just sort of a casual relationship with the organic world?
No, I grew up. I grew up in nature. Fully clothed, but I grew up in nature. So I had many years where growing up, I would just go outside and spend all day outside. From building forts to just exploring, and so it was always around growing up. I actually didn't really know what a city was until I went to MICA in Baltimore. We're driving into the city, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we went too far. This is New York, and that was my first experience. I mean, I'd been to cities, but not really, long term like that. So that was. Growing up, I was always surrounded by nature, and I enjoy being in nature and sort of looking around. In a very small area, you can find so much. When I was teaching, actually, that was one of my favorite things to give as an assignment. I would ask students to create a 10 by 10 foot square outside in their yard. And I wanted them to photograph within that square, and they really started to see and look instead of just assuming, that there's a grass, we're going to photograph grass, but really getting close. And it was always interesting to see what they came up with. So, and I sort of do the same thing. If I walk up and down to get to the mailbox, I'll pass this one tree multiple times, and each time there's something different. So I don't venture too far away, generally with the work that's in the exhibition. There's a couple that I ended up in Arizona for obvious reasons. The cacti don't really do well here. So
yeah, I was going to ask you about the places where you were photographing. Was it all in the DMV area, or you mentioned that one was in
for the most part, it's all very much around the house. There's a few exceptions. Saguaro is in Arizona. I did a series of images, but everything that's pretty much on my website related to this series, so the duotones, were done locally.
Around the house, which is so magical, right?
It is very.
You can find so much. That you can find so much magic just within the confines of your home makes me actually feel like I should go and pay attention to my little urban garden a little more.
There's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah. That's so nice. So this particular work is really nice. You use a lot of water in your work. Some is icy, so clearly you were out there in the winter.
I was.
And this one more looks like a dewdrop. I don't think it looks like it's a frozen piece, but it's really interesting. Just the noticing the interaction of water with organic life. And of course, water is critical to all life. So do you have any like thoughts about your interest in water or frozen water?
I do like to sail, but I don't think that has anything to do with it.
You're quite the Renaissance man.
Well, thank you. But it's actually one of the first things I noticed when I started photographing up close, is the interaction of the subject matter and whatever else is going around it, or happening around it. Ice was especially my interest, and I do have to say that I generally don't bundle up when I go out and photograph. So being close to the house, I can run out, photograph for 10 minutes and then run back in and warm up and then go back out. So I don't plan ahead if I'm going to go and photograph. It's just whatever happens. So the idea of ice sort of fascinates me, and you can see in this particular image how so very strange the texture becomes, and it's so unique. It's sort of like a landscape, a lunar landscape, or a texture that's sort of otherworldly. And I like to do the black and white, or in this case, the duotone, because it just gives you that texture and the mood. It doesn't say, oh, this is green or this is red, where it then takes away from, reading the subject as something other than, I mean, I don't want it to be a berry. I want it to be, an icy tongue coming out of a creature, or some kind of.
It looks like a dragon. It looks very like it's alive. I mean, I know it is alive, but now it looks even more alive. But
I noticed. I spent a lot of time looking over. This is I think this is also an Andina bush, and that's so there's a lot of things that go on. My intention with this series of the photographs is to create an image and not necessarily just capture an image. We can capture a sunset, sunrise, but I want to create an image that's so that the manipulation, the subject matter, the way it's photographed, the minimal approach, the out of focus, all those elements are designed to create the image.
Yeah.
Versus just recording it as it comes.
Yeah. So how much would you rely on manipulation with the a computer, and how much of it is just what you're actually taking from the photograph, sort of like just that pure shot, if you will?
Well, these are heavily manipulated. The initial my initial impetus was the split toning, which in traditional photography was a poisonous selenium toner. Not good, soaks up through your skin, so you always want to wear gloves. But I'm glad we're past that stage of photography in many ways. But then in order to create the warm tone, you would have to bleach it back with another poisonous chemical. And it would create the warm tones in the highlights, and the shadows remained cool, so to speak, bluish cool, dark blue. So that was what I wanted to recreate. But these are actually far more emphasized. And it's actually allowed me to really fine tune what I could see, what I wanted to emphasize. The shadows were really dark, bluish, but there was still detail there. The other issue with the split toning is you would have 10 prints ready to tone, and you might end up with 2 or 1 because the chemical interaction you couldn't control it. So that was originally why I started using the duotone. Also, the printer that I have is an early generation Epson large format printer, and it wasn't really a good color printer. It was okay, but I wanted to see what would happen if I used that printer for these particular series, and it's actually done extremely well. It's a little bit rough, which I like, but it did create that. It emphasizes that, that abstract mystery of these pieces.
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea. I mean, this is metamorphosis. I'm presuming that this is a cocoon of some kind.
I have no idea.
You have no idea. Okay.
This one was actually just, it was hanging from this tree. Actually, it was hanging from a serviceberry tree that I do know. And it just had all these tentacles coming out of it. So cocoon, but I've not been able to find anything to it. And then a friend said, well, just call it metamorphosis. And that's what it was. So,
this one's very intriguing as well. I don't know if I feel that there's also, there's something that is both alluring about the images and also a little, makes me feel a little squeamish about, like what in particular would this be like? Like more or do you know, or is it just?
I do. This was photographed, and I see Lisa Brown is here. This was photographed actually on one of the sailing trips that I was invited to. It was walking on the beach, and this is what I found. It's an abstract, very odd plant that really just intrigued me, and I photographed it for a while. And it was sort of greenish, red. I'm sorry, it was reddish, but it didn't feel like anything when it was red. It just looked abstract. So that was one of the early ones that I changed because of the highlights and the depth. But yes, it is supposed to make you squeamish. So I like that. I need to add that to my description of my work. Squeamish.
So as it repels and attracts.
Yes.
Okay. Fantastic. So I just wanted to ask you also, as we go through these slides, you have so many such an interesting background. You, I guess, grew up in Germany. You speak fluent German. You grew up in the countryside of the UK, and you're into photography and sailing. You just seem like sort of a well-rounded individual with a lot of eclectic interests. And so I'm just curious about any influences you might have. I know not all artists actually are influenced by other artists. Some of artists can be influenced by literature or so forth, and or philosophy. So I was just wondering if you had anything in particular in your life, that maybe Zen philosophy, that because you're noticing every little details, which is great. But if you have anything that you'd like to let us know that sort of goes into the work, or sort of basis or philosophy of life.
Well, the key word for me, I think throughout my life, is curiosity.
Okay.
I've always been curious about anything. I'll try anything once, maybe twice, and then. So for me, I was always curious about things, either how things worked or what they looked like. so this was sort of a natural extension of that curiosity for me. That's why I partly called it this. I gave it this title because I've always wanted to see what was beyond the next door. Whether it was a challenge of building something or fixing or sailing a much larger boat, to just the curiosity of what might be just around me on the ground or in the bushes. So that's always been part of my philosophy. Over the several decades of being in photography and the arts in general, I've always been interested in learning from other artists or seeing how other artists do things. I've had some collaborations because of that. But I've in terms of well-known photographers, there are a handful that I can say early on. Harry Callahan was one photographer that I looked up to early on when I was still doing very formal work, and I'd hoped to meet him in was it Provincetown. But then I chickened out and didn't go say hi. But then everyone said you should have just gone to say hi to him. You would have talked about your work. So, but in general, I like a lot of different art and photography. There's always something there that intrigues me. For me, these are so very different because I think I've combined, the traditional macro photography, which would be a color image, with a very older look. A friend of mine actually just recently made a comment actually on Facebook. He said, if Julia Margaret Cameron and Carl Blossfeld had a photo baby, these would be it. Which was a very, that's Claudio Vasquez, who I worked with for many years. And which is what I really, that was very nice. But yes, Julia Margaret Cameron had the very old portraiture and the warm the Van Dyke Brown, the warmer tone images, and then Carl Blossfeld does the very formal floral photograph, not floral, leaves, petals, a very formal arrangement, just flat, beautiful images, So those are sort of, as I go through my list of people, those are the influences I've had over the years. But nothing specific or philosophy or that's earth-shattering that I followed all my life. So.
Okay, great. So ever evolving in curiosity. I think that's a good motto for life. So what I'd like to do right now is just to go ahead and move the floor over to the participants who are watching here today. If you have any questions, we have one from Ellen Cornett. Welcome. And she's asking, Stuart, I wonder if you ever think about macro photographs of car parts, asking for a friend.
Well, yes, I actually have a number of images of car parts that one of my hobbies is little British cars, and I restore them as need be as well. Some people say that's more of a Achilles heel than anything else. Okay. But I have photographed close-ups of car parts for the very same reason that they are very unusual. You see things that, well, most people probably won't see. They're sort of hidden for the most part. I found them to be too predictable. The organic images were just a lot more spontaneous, and I didn't know what I was going to get. The mechanical parts have more of a predictability about them. But I have some that I might I might play with some more.
So I'm just going to show everyone a couple more of these photographs. In this one in particular, I have to say is in terms of lighting lotus pod with leaf, just that one plane being really so bright. For me in particular, it struck me. So just was that manipulated or was that like an actual, was the lighting already in place?
Yes, this was actually just as I came upon them. This was actually a day that I was not working around the house. A photographer that I know, Tom Wolfe, actually had posted that he was going to have his students meet at the Kenilworth Aquatic Gardens. So I thought, I'll just go. And actually quite a few of the images in the show, 3 or 4, were taken that day, and this was one of them. And I just sort of didn't know what to expect, and but they just became otherworldly. They were not just lotus pods and shadows. They just became these otherworldly plant shapes and shadows.
Okay, so we have another question, and this is from Katie Hecklinger. It says, your work looks perfectly at home in BlackRock's Gallery 2, which was actually renovated before you installed your exhibition. So that was nice, I'm sure.
Yeah,
and she's asking, how does the space inform the selection of the work and how it's installed? And I actually had COVID when you were installing, so you installed that by yourself. And I do think that you cut out a couple of your original photographs that you were going to include. So did the new space inform your work in a certain way, or?
When I had laid it out, it was before any of that, and I just sort of roughly laid things down at that time on the carpet. So the space, actually, what has happened is it's become a unified space, which helps any exhibition. I did not plan for the symbiotic, relationship that has happened, where there's the warm tones of the floor and the pieces on the walls really work together very well. I thought Katie might be asking if I could keep it up there forever, because it does work extremely well. But no, I did not. It just so happened, the warm tone, and I wasn't really. I didn't really look beyond what I had framed and matted to see how it would work. I knew the floor was coming in, but I didn't know what color it was. But I think you mentioned the color of the wall would be repainted, so I knew a little bit of that. But I do like the way it all came together. But it was,
it's absolutely
a smidgen of planning, but not. So good choice on the floor, without a doubt. And thank you for that. I appreciate that.
You are the first person to christen the place. So, do we have any other questions from who is here? No. Okay. Well, I just want to let you know that all of these works are for sale. They are gorgeous works, and you can see that they're framed and unframed works, are all very reasonably priced. And if you are interested, feel free to send me an email after this meeting, and please do come to the opening reception. That is going to be on February 12th from 5 to 7 p.m. And I look forward to seeing everybody there. Stuart, thank you so much. We were really enjoying your exhibition. I should mention to everyone also that there's a magnificent educational component to his work, in the sense that we have placed microscopes in the space so that students can come in, or children, and even actually adults can come in and look at specimens that have been provided for them underneath a microscope, and then they can sketch them. So this is a lot of fun, actually, just sort of taking your work and bringing that into, this more educational interactive environment as well. So, I mean, it's just a stunning show. So looking forward to seeing everybody on the 12th. Do we have any last final words?
I would like to say thank you to everybody for joining and listening in. I hope I didn't ramble too much.
No, you were great.
So I appreciate you taking the time, really do.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Have a great day.
Bye.